Well, good afternoon, everybody. Why don't we get started here? Welcome to the October Northwest Gas Association webinar. My name is Connor Wrighton, and I will serve as your moderator for today. And today we'll be joined by John Switalski of Californians for Balanced Energy Solutions, which is a relatively new organization that's telling the story of natural gas in California. But before we start, let's review the basics for how the webinars work. We set aside plenty of time for questions, and we're very encouraging of those coming up as soon as you think of them. In order to do that, because each of you will be muted throughout the presentation, we ask that you go to the chat box in your GoToMeeting control panel. You can see it's a drop-down menu near the bottom. If you open that and address any questions to either the whole audience or to me in particular, I'll be happy to introduce your question on your behalf. So again, please type those out.
Oh, they are talking, but I'm not here.
Introduce them at the correct time.
I'm not sure why.
We got a little bit of sound here. One moment. Okay, I think I've got that fixed. We're happy to share a PDF copy of the slides today to those who request it. You can get that by sending me an email at creiten@nwga.org. Though the easiest way to do that is just to respond to the email that I sent out this morning with the link that you used to get on here. I'll respond with that PDF after we are done here today. We are also recording today's webinar, and if you're willing to wait until after we conclude, usually I can send out a link to that about 30 minutes after we conclude. Again, just send me an email at creiten@nwga.org. I'll be happy to send you either of those things. We just got finished actually this morning setting up our November webinar for next month. We are going to be joined by an organization called One Future, and we'll discuss upstream methane emissions and what One Future is doing to encourage reduced upstream methane emissions rates. That's going to take place on November 14th. We haven't announced that online yet. However, we did put up a sign-up page on nwga.org, so we ask that you go and sign up for that if you're interested. We are also going to be finishing up our 2019 webinar series in December with our annual Pacific Northwest Economic Update with Grant Forsyth. That is also available online, so again, go to nwga.org to sign up for that. And as always, we ask that you take a moment to mark off your calendars for next year's annual energy conference, which will take place at Skamania Lodge. And that is going to happen on June 3rd and 4th, 2020. We had a great event this year, and we hope that we'll see many of you there. Finally, just before we start, I want to introduce the Northwest Gas Association for those who might not be familiar with us. We represent the 6 investor-owned gas utilities operating in the Pacific Northwest, along with the 3 large natural gas transmission lines. Our members are in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and British Columbia. As always, please visit our website at nwga.org for more info. And with that, I will get things set up so we can throw things over to John. All right, thanks, John. That looks good.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Connor, and good afternoon, everyone who's joined us here. I do very much appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today about Californians for Balanced Energy Solutions, why we were formed, who we are, why we are doing the work that we are doing. So we are a coalition of natural and renewable gas users. It's pretty much that simple. We represent large industry, for example, California Steel, to labor unions, utility workers union, and other coalition of contract unions, building trades. We also represent affordable housing developers. We represent nonprofits who serve low-income utility customers, and we represent other businesses, large and small. We began in January of 2019. And there was a group of of gas user stakeholders, again, businesses large and small, along with utility in Southern California, SoCal Gas, that really came to the realization that natural gas is under an existential threat that is sustained and will only become more acute as time goes by. And I'll be specific about different regulatory proceedings in California and pieces of legislation that have been passed recently that will underscore that realization. But it is under the auspices of reducing climate change causing greenhouse gas emissions. And so we are working every day to communicate to our constituencies, to our gas users, residential, commercial, and industrial. So like I just said, our goal is to educate Californians about the importance of natural renewable gas for improving the environment. That means that we support all of the mandates that California has put on its state towards reducing those greenhouse gas emissions, towards reducing our impact on climate change. We just differ with the way that those mandates are being implemented. So we support balanced energies policies that fight climate change. We communicate on a number of different fronts on protecting, excuse me, one moment. That protect customer choice, that stop the creation of an all-electric monopoly. We need to keep energy affordable in California, and then of course deploying the right energy in the right place. This really is an affordability issue, first and foremost, in our opinion. California, like other parts of the country, especially in the Northwest, face a extreme affordability crisis. It is not just in the ability to own, which is almost unreachable for the vast majority of Californians, but to even rent an apartment, to rent a home. And so it's not just the housing costs but it's the cost to operate that home. And we are very concerned that going with an all-electric mandate, considering one technology or one source of energy to reduce our climate change, is going to exacerbate our affordability and housing crisis here in California. One interesting statistic is that there are about 7 of the 21 million customers of SoCal Gas are on reduced bills, if you will. So they have their gas subsidized through various programs throughout the state that the gas company deploys. And so we have the highest poverty rate in California while maintaining the highest cost of living statewide. Secondly, we're concerned about the creation of an all-electric monopoly. I'm sure you all have seen the papers in recent days and weeks that there are wildfires spreading throughout California, which PG&E and Southern California Edison and others have shut off power to residents across the state, and that needs to be done. That these devastating wildfires need residents need to be protected from those. But in the meantime, there are technologies that we can deploy that would help with this crisis. So while the state is concerned only about electrifying homes in its regulatory proceedings, it's not pursuing technologies such as fuel cells or any other hydrogen technologies, which have low spark and can be contained to an individual's home. And so we can lessen the impacts of these power shutoffs. We're also concerned on the industrial level. Industry today operates on very small margins, like many businesses, and they are very concerned that when the state and certain advocates work towards drawing down the gas system, treating it as a stranded asset, transitioning away from allowing gas utilities to invest in their infrastructure, costs for everyone will rise. So why are we here specifically? The use of natural gas is not under threat long-term, but it is most definitely under threat today. There are two pieces of legislation last year that laid out, AB 3232 laid out emission reductions, 30% under 1990 levels, I believe are the numbers, and then 1477, which laid out two pilot projects. These pilot projects are using gas ratepayer dollars to create electric homes, essentially. So to transition gas-using homes or dual fuel homes into complete complete electricity. And we really view that as a nose under the camel's tent. And on top of that, there are no equitable income requirements on those pilot projects. And so while we are taking oftentimes poor people's ratepayer dollars and using them to upgrade people's homes who can already then afford electric appliances, we view that as really problematic. But on a larger picture, the rhetoric and the preceding filings along the implementation of AB 3232 and SB 1477 have been really, really concerning. The NRDC and the EDF adamantly calls for the end of the usage of natural gas. It is actively engaged in the PUC proceedings, and to this point, the PUC has been very warm and welcome, and almost to the point, and this is my own opinion, of being biased actors in this. And so that's a bit frustrating. On top of what's happening in the legislature and at the PUC, there are municipal ordinances occurring across the state. You may know that recently the cities of Berkeley and the cities of San Luis Obispo voted to enact building regulations for all new buildings. And in the case of San Luis Obispo, add penalties to having a dual fuel home or hooking up gas, also making it financially problematic or disincentivizing gas. The Building Decarbonization Coalition, which is the main advocate for these municipal ordinances, is largely funded by PG&E, Southern California Edison, along with the electric heat pump manufacturers, et cetera, and those in the environmental community. They've stated publicly that they estimate that there are 50 other municipalities that are poised to pass these. So our aim really is to highlight this to the public, to say to not only other city leaders, but to residents throughout the state that the affordability of your electricity, of your utility bills is in jeopardy, compounding a larger problem, and that by putting all of our eggs in one electricity basket, we are preventing technologies that could help diversify our risk to mitigate our risk to wildfires and shutoffs, that the state is just not considering this. And so this is our challenge. So what are we doing? We have focused earned media events. We've done this in the Chinese American community with Chinese chefs who are adamantly switching away from natural gas. We've run radio ads. We have a targeted email campaign, and we do digital ads. But probably our most potent tactic is social media, which is probably not surprising. We have a sustained paid social media effort throughout the state that, again, hits the main points of energy affordability, points of choice, and it also talks about energy reliability. And so this is something we've deployed since this summer, and we have seen interest in these issues and in our organization skyrocket, which has really proved to us that these issues are of concern to average homeowners, average voters, and that the issue is very salient. What the electrification advocates do not use as an argument for eliminating the use of natural gas is that people want it. In fact, there's a poll that the Building Industry Association did in 2018 that suggests that 80% of voters in California do not want to be forced to use all electricity in their homes or to give up natural gas. So we've run somewhat of a guerrilla style campaign. We've been in front of Chinese chefs, as I told you. We did a conference with the Latino Food Industry Association. We are trying to build momentum. And one of the tactics I wanted to highlight here, which I think is kind of fun, is that we just did a couple guerrilla style videos, just kind of man on the street interviewing different people, just average folks. You know, I feel sometimes I get caught up in the policy machinations or Twitterverse, and really the campaign should be taken to just people who passively consume public policy or politics or energy banter. And so I just wanted to play these 3 30-second videos for you, just to show you how one tactic that we're using at somewhat of a pedestrian level to really engage everyday citizens. Oh no, I'm sorry, one moment. I don't know. I apologize, I'm new to this platform. So there we go.
You can control temperature so much better than you can with electric. In fact, when I bought a house in December, one of the selling points is the fact that it had a brand new gas stove. Easier to manipulate the heat intensity of anything that you're going to cook.
I think it tastes better. It's easier to control. It's just, I think, a much simpler way to do things.
I wasn't aware, and I don't think that it's fair that they should have regulation over something that we all need to effectively perform our jobs and to cook at home. I think it's a very bad idea, and I think people are going to be outraged when this becomes public knowledge.
And then lastly,
probably going to be more costly for families, for people to be able to convert what they have over to a system. I hope they don't want to go out to eat anymore because it's going to affect the taste of their food. I think that people should be able to have the choice and decide if they want to use natural gas or electric.
I mean, it's in your home. You should be able to have the decision whether or not you can have electric or not.
So that just gives you, again, just a little slice of some of the tactics that we're using. So this presentation was really just meant to be a basic introduction of the advocacy work that we're doing, the threatening policy environment that is ever increasing here in California, and just to give you kind of a preview into our organization. And so I'm happy to take any questions and delve into any of these issues in depth, but hopefully that just gave you a good little primer into what we're about.
Yeah, thank you, John. For anyone who logged in a little bit later, again, please use the chat box in the GoToMeeting control panel near the bottom to type out your questions. I'd be happy to introduce them on your behalf. And while folks are typing, we'll ask the first one here, which is, so you've got these 3 videos here. Where do these show up, and how has the response been, and how is that response how are you seeing that response come through?
So we've deployed these videos largely on social media, but we also host them on our website. And so when we do earned media or we're driving people to our website, they can click through these videos, and then hopefully we're asking people, as you can see at the end of this, join us. But the social media has probably been most effective, because when you are scrolling through Facebook, or you're scrolling through Twitter, you need something that kind of stands out, and text just doesn't accomplish that. Or, you know, even in this space, not even really a meme doesn't really do that. And so these videos we find are really effective to just giving people 30 seconds, because they won't take a minute, they won't take 2 minutes if it's something that they have never been introduced to before. So we're finding that it serves really that purpose, to introduce people to these issues at a very basic level. So do you want to keep, it's just trying to raise awareness. So we ask very simple questions. Do you want to keep your gas stove? Do you know that there are efforts to eliminate gas? It's tough to compete with all of the stuff that's going on social media. And so we found that this is very effective to grabbing their attention and then moving them to our website so that they sign up onto our campaign.
And when you're talking to these folks and you're giving them some basic education about what's going on, how has their response been in terms of, are people aware that this type of thing is going on, or is it just generally shocked that there's some threat to their natural gas appliances?
It's definitely the latter. The trouble that we have is that many of these decisions will be done at the regulatory level. And what the legislature does is, they will send a very broad kind of directive to the PUC and tell them to go implement it. Well, the PUC has very arcane legal regulatory procedures. It's the 6-figure price tag to engage with the PUC effectively through regulatory attorneys. And so people have no idea what's going on there. They can't understand. I can't understand it. So somebody who doesn't know what's going on, barely pays attention to the newspapers, has no idea what's happening. And so this has been a good entryway into people's awareness. It has been effective. But if I'm going to communicate about some PUC regulation that AB 1477 did in 2018, nobody even knows what that means. It's like Greek.
I'm interested in something that you had said earlier in the webinar, which is that there's a short-term threat to natural gas, but that there might not be as significant a long-term threat to natural gas. Is that a good summary of what you said? And I'm
No,
interested in your perspective on why that is the case.
no, I'm sorry. I meant that it's not just a long-term threat, it is a short-term threat. And
Gotcha.
I'll tell you why. I come across the barrier that people always think something's going to happen way down the road, so I don't need to engage now. Or that will never happen. You know, that's so far outside of reality. You're just using it as scare tactic. So what I say is that this is a short-term threat now because the regulatory proceeding could very well end up with appliance codes that phases out gas stoves. And so what I tell people to create a sense of urgency, your gas stove could break in 3 to 5 years. Say you go to Home Depot and you want to replace that gas stove, and they say, I'm sorry, ma'am, sir, we don't sell those anymore. In fact, in California, we only sell electric stoves. So what does that mean? I mean, that means to the consumer, they have to figure out how to replace the wiring, the panel. They have to go through a significant disruption, especially if they don't have the means to do so. Then, you know, maybe they get a voucher from the state that helps cover a vast majority of it. But the point is that there is a reality that people's ability to access natural gas is not far off into the future.
John,
And I'll just add to that this is all, yeah, hello?
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I just wanted to add to that, this is all really unnecessary, the disruption to households. You know, we talk a lot about renewable natural gas, which I'm sure the folks on this webinar are more familiar with than I am. But what we say is that while we're decarbonizing the electricity supply through wind and solar, that the state of California should also incentivize the decarbonization of the gas supply, and that we have all of this methane just going off into the atmosphere anyways. We will not meet the reductions that the state has, the mandates that the state has put on for methane reductions. And that if we put just 5 to 10% of the supply of renewable natural gas, of the supply into the pipelines, we could meet the same targets of emissions reductions than electrifying everything, building out the grid even more, disrupting people's lives and their pocketbooks, and increasing their energy costs. And the state, to this point, in large part, has not gotten behind renewable natural gas.
John, have you seen any change in the dialogue with your audiences over the last few weeks in light of the electric customer shutoffs that have been going on in Northern California?
We have. You know, we've been pretty careful to communicate around this because this is, you know, very serious, and there have been fatalities, and the electric utilities need to do these shutoffs. But I think that people have raised awareness that it just doesn't connect for them. Why am I being asked to go electric, to get rid of my stove, to, you know, have a hot water, a heat pump, a tankless water heater? Why am I being asked to do this? Why is the state moving in this direction while all these power shutoffs are occurring? I mean, if you just think about it, it just doesn't quite make sense. Now, maybe in a certain public policy forum, you could draw the dots through some very complicated language. But if you just talk to, you know, the guy at the bus stop, it doesn't make sense. And so we're really trying to talk to the guy at the bus stop and saying, you know, we just need a balanced approach where the state really should just consider not just electric technologies, but gas and hydrogen technologies as well. Why shouldn't we be bringing all of our assets to bear in the face of huge climate change problems, but also in the face of unprecedented wildfires and electric shutoffs? We feel that gas can be part of mitigating that risk and a part of that solution. Unfortunately, I'm afraid we're not being heard.
Yeah, it occurs to me that, of course, we appreciate the severity of the situation and why that's occurring, and but it seems that the natural gas system it sort of highlights the need for us to plan for, whether it's natural disasters or otherwise, for a more resilient system that natural gas can help to provide, and that perhaps we're not adequately planning for in some areas. So yeah, it's certainly an interesting situation, and yeah. So I have no further questions, but I'm going to give folks about 30 more seconds here to type out any questions they might have. In the meantime, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. It's very interesting, and again, want to remind folks that if you were to send me an email, you can get access to either these slides or to a recording of this webinar, and you can get me at creiten@nwga.org. And just one more time, thank you, John, for doing this.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Well, in the absence of any, we got one just in before the wire here. Do you see any opportunities for collaboration between electric and gas? You mentioned reliability or other situations like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the delivery amongst utility companies, I think that there is an opportunity. I think that they are probably, in the face of this, working to figure that out. In the advocacy space, it's hard to see where there's any opportunities to work together. The electric utilities are, even PG&E, which has gas in it too, is fully supportive of the elimination of gas in the transitioning the gas system. If you just Google gridworks.org, there is a 23-page white paper that PG&E and others have funded that talks about transitioning the gas system, raising rates to basically use it as, just treat it as a stranded asset and no longer invest in it, thereby, getting rid of it over time. And so I also tell people this is really an economic battle. This is a battle for market share over literally household customers masquerading as an environmental issue. This is Edison looking to profit over gas users. It would require them to build infrastructure, which they get a guaranteed rate of return. And frankly, the combined PG&E, they make more money off electricity customers than they do gas customers. Electricity is significantly more expensive, and so this is really about reducing gas and increasing the shareholder price of these electricity companies.
Great. All right. Well, that's going to bring this month's webinar to a close. Again, I hope that we'll see many of you online next month for our November webinar examining upstream methane emissions and the work that's going on to reduce those. So we will see many of you next month. Thank you again, John, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.